Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, and I'm very grateful to introduce you to Dr. Holly Parker, or Dr. Holly as she's more playfully known. Holly is a psychologist with a passion for walking alongside individuals and couples as they strive to cultivate a more connected, enriching life. She obtained her PhD in experimental psychopathology from Harvard University, and presently she engages in clinical work, teaching, public education, and writing. She's actually the author of two books called When Reality Bites, How Denial Helps, and What to Do When It Hurts. And If We're Together, Why Do I Feel So Alone? How to Build Intimacy with an Emotionally Unavailable Partner. She also contributes to various publications such as Psychology Today and has conducted many media interviews through outlets such as Self Magazine, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Chicago Tribune, ABC News, Medical Daily, and so on. I met Dr. Parker, or Dr. Holly as she's known, through the Harvard Extension School, where I took a really amazing course called Introduction to Social Psychology. I know she teaches other courses. One of them is the Psychology of Close Relationships through the Harvard Extension School and Harvard Summer School. And it is just a really, really huge honor, Holly, to have you here today to speak about such an important topic around kind of relationships and intimacy, because it's something that's on the minds of a lot of people that may be struggling with that. So, how about we start off a little bit with kind of talking a little bit about what you're seeing in your work. I know you specialize in working, as we said, with individuals and couples and helping them to build like emotional and physical intimacy. And so, what are you kind of seeing as some of the most common challenges or issues that people struggle with when it comes to creating a really satisfying relationship?
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful question. And of course, Vera, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an amazing, amazing honor. So thrilled to be here. And
Love to have you here.
oh, it's a delight. And really this question is so meaningful. You're right. Kind of how to create a satisfying relationship that is more connected, that is rewarding, that's deeper, that persists over time. Uh, it is so important. It is on the minds of people, and it is not for the faint of heart. It's really not. And I think a lot of times people can, conceptually really long for deep, lasting love and connection. But they may not, they may have some skepticism that it's really for them, that they can really have that, and that it can be lasting, whether it's through awareness of divorce statistics, which often statistics say it's 50% in popular press. You'll see that. Technically, it's a little bit less than that. It's more between 40 and 50%, or whether it's the models people have had that they can really doubt that it's achievable. And there are barriers to that. Thankfully, these barriers can be overcome. I think that's the really positive, important part of this. So, in terms of things that people can really struggle with, one really is coming face to face with intimacy itself. It is vulnerable. It's really vulnerable to put yourself out there. If we think about what's involved, a lot of times I tell people that, I think of what as human beings we're asked to do when we are in a serious romantic relationship that where we're willing to be trusting. It's like taking your heart out, putting it on a block, and giving your partner a gentle cloth and a hammer. And really hoping that they're not going to use the hammer, really hoping as if to say, I'm entrusting you with my heart. Please take care of it. That is not an easy thing to do. And as human beings, it is so natural that we can have ways of pulling back, of hesitating to take risks, of hesitating to be intimate. And it's really, I think, those ways in which takes all kinds of forms, where people can try to protect themselves in a relationship that is healthy and that would be safe. They can protect themselves. It works in the short term because they're feeling less vulnerable. The challenge is that it actually can work against them because it can wind up shutting doors, whether in the short term or over time, to the rewarding intimacy that they're seeking, to the possibility of greater comfort, being known, knowing their partner, realizing, maybe having healing emotional experiences that can help them learn new lessons from the past that may have taught them that relationships weren't safe, where they could be in a relationship now that is safe and really experience that. So there are lots of ways that can show up. And so a lot of the focus, I think, of working with couples and individuals in different ways is helping them to overcome ways they might shield themselves, ways they might protect themselves. And of course, those aren't the only things. It could be helping them to be clearer with their partner, helping them to really prioritize togetherness as opposed to ways that the busyness of life can kind of take center stage and shield these moments of fun and leisure, which can feel like a luxury, and they're not. Actually, research shows they're anything but. Those are really, I think, self-protection that can really come back to bite people, challenges in communication, ways of kind of really not intentionally, but ways of really not mindfully prioritizing the relationship. These are some of the most common things that I think really can happen for people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing these. And
Mhm.
it sounds like they're obviously the self-protection, those protective mechanisms are a big block to future, even more connected, authentic, vulnerable relationships.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned some of that skepticism, like the belief, is this really something that is available and possible for me? Uh,
Mhm.
which I imagine also, just like the self-protective mechanism, starts very early on in life. And then, as you said, the actual like communication strategies. How do we communicate clearly and authentically in a safe way with our partner?
That's right. That's
And
right.
so, tell us
Also,
a Mhm.
which is also learned too. Mhm.
So, what are some of the ways that people can help to manage some of the skepticism or self-protective mechanisms?
Yeah, I love that question. So it's one thing that I would advise, which this is not easy, doable, and not easy, is inviting themselves to be mindful, to meaning to be curious if they can with themselves, to be non-judgmental with themselves if they can. Minds love, minds love to be judgmental, especially of the self, right? So where people can do that, that's a really meaningful place to start. Also, in terms of increasing awareness, I think one thing that can be useful is for a person to see if they can catch moments where they might pull away from intimacy. Because sometimes people can stay away from intimacy and they may not even realize, they might not even be conscious that they're doing it. So, for instance, let's say my partner um, gives me a compliment, right? And let's say that I brush it away, for example, or I make a joke, um, or I change the subject, right? These are things, lots of things that people can do. If I were trying to kind of catch myself staying away from intimacy, for example, and this is something that viewers can try with themselves. For instance, I might say, "Huh, isn't that interesting? My partner just gave me a compliment, and I just brushed by it. Hmm.
Mhm.
Wow. So what might have led me to do that? What might have happened there? What might have happened just before? Just before I brushed it away? What was I feeling? What was the narrative that my mind was telling me? Or another thing could be, let's say that, our partner tries to get closer to us physically, right? And tries to hold us, for example, and we try to get away from that. We could say, "Huh, so what was I feeling? What was that?" That can be a nice way in catching moments like that that will show up. Uh, that can be a good way in to start to see, okay, what's happening? How might challenges with intimacy, wherever they exist, show up for us. So I think those are powerful ways of starting to catch it. And also, part of it, I think, depends on what the nature of the challenge is. So let me give a specific example of that. And there's some fascinating research and scholarship on this, which is the ways that as human beings we and this comes from learning. There's so much that we get from learning that we don't realize that our family relationships growing up are kind of like our relationship classroom.
Mm.
We have models when we see our caregivers. How are they interacting? How do they treat us? And we develop what one of the kind of preeminent scholars, kind of the main scholar on attachment, John Bowlby, called working models. We develop these schemas, these ways of understanding ourselves and other people. So, for example, we learn, and I'm putting this in air quotes because these lessons may not actually be accurate, of course. We can acquire ideas about whether we're lovable or not. Are we worth being close to or not? Are we worth being seen or not? Um, how do relationships work? Do we learn that we can really depend on people, that they're safe, that we can open up to them, that we can feel comfortable with them, that it's safe to be close? Or do we learn that we can't rely on people, that we're going to be alone, that we have to rely on ourselves? We can't lean on anybody else. Um, these kinds of lessons powerfully shape how we see ourselves, how we see relationships, and we can kind of hold on to those because they give us a way of understanding ourselves and other people. And in some cases, we can hold on to, for example, ways of seeing ourselves because they can give us, as scholars have noted, a sense of control, a sense of kind of existential security that we like to know that we've got our finger on the pulse of reality, and that we can understand ourselves. And so if we are now, if we imagine that, if we take that, we're in a relationship where, let's say, for example, we don't feel good about ourselves and we don't believe that we can really trust uh, a relationship partner to really be reliable and safe and there for us. But we've got this partner who actually is reliable and safe and who sees the best in us. What are we likely to do? There's evidence that we're likely to hold on to these ways of seeing ourselves, not consciously. It's not that we want to have someone speak to us in a negative way and criticize us or reject us. We could long for that consciously, but on an unconscious level, the pull of familiarity, that's safety, even if it doesn't feel good at some level. So we might have trouble, in other words, taking in if we hear a partner compliment us or say how great we are. Ooh, right. That doesn't, if we don't feel good about ourselves, we might feel like, well, that doesn't map on to how I see myself, right? I can't trust that. We might have a narrative that shows up like, my partner must not get me. Or maybe they're lying, they're just being nice, right? There's evidence that people can think that, right? My partner's just being nice, they don't get me. Um, it can feel unsettling to think that, gee, I don't think I'm all that great, and this person thinks I'm great. What do I do with that? So we might distance ourselves in certain ways from that relationship. Or we might not see the person in as positive a light, which then inadvertently pushes them away, can change how they see us. And now we've got this confirmation of this negative idea that we held all along. So it can really keep us trapped, for example, and prevents us from really seeing that maybe we are a lot better than we learned to think we were. Maybe relationships are a lot safer than we learned to think they are. Again, these things don't play out consciously, and when someone has that kind of a challenge, which is very, very common, um, that it's really important to be able to spotlight that and be curious about where do these messages come from. It's like a way of disempowering them a little bit. There's more to it, but I think it can be really helpful for people to ask themselves, huh, I've got this idea that I'm not worthy of my partner, that I'm not good enough, that relationships aren't safe. Where did I learn that? Right? Or I got this idea that conflict is dangerous, that if I talk to my partner, they're never going to hear me. That gets to communication too, right? Where did I learn that? Where did I see that? And sometimes by being curious about that and thinking about where it came from, because these things don't happen randomly, these beliefs don't come up randomly, that can be a very powerful step. Not the only one, but a powerful one toward changing things.
And I imagine that everything that we're talking about here today, even though we're focusing on the context of an intimate romantic relationship, it's also true in leadership, right? In terms of certain beliefs, if I'm not good enough, or if I believe that I'm not worthy, or that I'm not a good leader, then I can tell myself all kinds of narratives that then shape the way that I behave, and then of course how others behave with me.
Yes,
And oftentimes those are not even true.
that's
And so getting curious about where do these mindsets, these beliefs come from
mm,
is very empowering. Now, some people might be thinking, okay, it's from what I perceived in my parents' relationship,
mm,
other people in my life. And then
mm,
I wonder if it might get to some like judgment of other people, or like I'm a victim kind of mindset, it's their fault that I am this way. So
mm.
how do we kind of manage that? And how do we like turn this into a positive? Like, how can we shift our mindsets, adapt our behaviors to get better results?
Yes, that's a great question, Vered. And what I would say is, really for one thing that's really vital is to differentiate two things. One, what happened to a person, what they experienced, is not their identity. Meaning it may be a part of their experience, of course, but it doesn't define who they are. So that's one point that I think is very two concepts that are important to differentiate. The other is that history is not destiny. And what's amazing about, I mean, we are learning machines as human beings, and relationships, learned lessons are beautifully alive. So that even if someone experienced a very painful upbringing, and it could be to walk alongside what you're wondering about, Verit, it sounds like it can be from family experiences. Also, people could have painful experiences in school where maybe they were bullied or and they might have been in addition to that, even if there wasn't kind of overt bullying, maybe they were alone, and they really didn't have friends they could connect to, other relationships that they may have experienced, right? These are all in the mix of influencing how people can see themselves and others. And over time, someone can have a very difficult upbringing. That does not mean that history has to repeat itself. In fact, people can really kind of have, there's a wonderful term that I've heard that I love called earned security, where they can cultivate really safe, rewarding relationships that also influence not only how they see themselves, but how they see other people. People can become more comfortable with letting in a new way of seeing themselves, of letting in a new way of seeing relationships. And so that would be combining those two pieces, that would be something I would invite people to hold on to, is to remember, okay, this happened to me. I experienced this. This is not who I am. This is a part of my history, and I have choices for what I do moving forward. And I can parent myself. I mean, the truth is, in our lives, we spend relatively a minor part of our lives being parented by somebody else. Then we get to take the reins. Then we have control, right? We get to decide what messages we give ourselves. We get to decide what kinds of experiences we have. And so that would be something I'd invite people to do, is to really think about, okay, what do I feel I deserve? What do I imagine for myself? And if I didn't get what I deserve, how can I start to cultivate experiences that give that to me now? It's never too late.
Wow, that's such a beautiful kind of metaphor. We get to now parent ourselves, and really that context of, for most of us, the time that we spent being parented by our
Mhm.
parents is, not nearly the same amount as we get to contribute to consciously, uh, focus on these more positive, more life-enhancing, loving
Mm.
thoughts toward ourselves. And so let's say we become conscious of some of these narratives. Like, how do we actually change them?
Right, right. One thing that I would say is uh, to as a starting point, um, to see really honoring where a person is, right? So if we don't feel good about ourselves, right, or if we don't think we're worthy, or if we don't think we can trust someone to really be there for us, I think one of the first steps is to not judge that and not try to force it. And it can be very tempting for there to be this added layer. I think of it as like a painful layer cake for someone, right? For someone to have not only what they experienced that influenced why they see themselves and others the way they do, and then there's the pain of that, and then there's the self-judgment of, oh, well, now, for example, person might think, I feel this way, so there must be something wrong with me, right? Um, I feel this way about other people. I don't trust other people. I don't feel good about myself. Here's another thing that makes relationships unsafe, or that makes me unlovable. Of course, that does not make, as hard as this is for would be for many people to imagine, it doesn't make them unlovable, right? It is a reflection of what they learned. And so if they can actually, here's an example of reparenting, if they can give themselves the acceptance they didn't get and start with, okay, this is where I'm at, and naming that and acknowledging it, that yes, it is hard for me to let in my partner's regard for me, or it's hard for me to let in that friendships or this romantic relationship, whatever it may be, right? Whatever someone is feeling and thinking, it's hard for me to let in that this is safe. Okay, right? So starting with that acceptance without forcing it. Okay, what's the minimum that I could let in? What's the minimum that I could? So thinly slicing it like an onion. So for example, let's say that a person uses a moment with their partner. Let's go back to that example of someone getting a compliment from their partner and then saying, "Oh, I'm noticing I'm brushing it away, or I'm making a joke," uh, and someone realizes, "Wow, I did that. What's happening?" Um, if they can even slow it down and say, "Okay, so my partner said I'm just absolutely wonderful. I can't let that in yet."
Mm.
By the way, I would also invite people to language matters. I would invite them to play with those time limited phrases like, I can't let that in right now, or I don't believe that yet. It seems small, but it can make a difference of of really opening the door to the possibility of change, as opposed to, I can't let that in. I can't let that in yet. Okay, so if I imagine my partner saying something else, what is it that I could let in? Hmm. Well, gee, maybe I could let in that that there are times when I'm a good partner sometimes. Okay, that works, right? Maybe can I let myself sit with that? Can I give that to myself? Or if that's hard, a person could even see if they could notice variations in what they're able to let in, whether it's from a friend, colleagues, their partner. Is there anything that their loved ones say that they can let in? Can they catch themselves doing that and really hold that? There's also another way is in terms of reparenting, how people talk to themselves. So a person can ask themselves, all right, what can I say to me? What's the minimum of what I could let in? And it actually reminds me of a wonderful self-compassion exercise that I remember reading, which is there are variations on it, and I just love it because it gives people flexibility. So the three variations are a person imagines uh, the compassionate part of themselves, giving kindness and care to the part of themselves who's suffering. There are people who are in a place where they can do that. There are other people who, understandably, through no fault of their own, aren't ready to do that yet. So then they can titrate it. So another example might be imagining, and this is another version of this, imagining a kind, loving, caring, wise mentor. This could be someone who is real, right? Who exists. This could be a compilation of people you make up for anyone who's spiritual, if they want to imagine God, right? It could be really anything. Uh, what would that person or presence, what would it say to them? And can they let that in? Or for where that might be a challenge, someone could imagine a loved one, a friend, who is feeling the same things they are. What would they give to that person? And can they give that to themselves? And if they can't, again, they can kind of thinly slice it. I'm imagining an onion. That's one of the kind of images I love of kind of picturing people were like onions. But what would be a kind of layer that someone could take in and give to themselves?
Wow. Wow. So, so, so powerful. That sense of love, that sense of self, who we really are, whether it's, as you said, we're ready to be able to have that part of us, the unconditionally loving part of us,
Mhm.
speak with, connect with, soothe those parts that are maybe more protective, more reactive, more scared, more doubtful. Um, if that's not right, or doesn't feel right, or not, we're not ready yet for that, then perhaps, as you said, to imagine a mentor or some uh,
Mm,
form, energetic being of some sort, a god or something that we imagine giving
mhm.
that to us, or what would we say, let's say, to a good friend who's going through this issue. And some of that, of course, is coming back to us because we're those that other person, that friend is a projection of us. So when we give the advice to the friend, we're really giving it to ourselves and giving
Exactly.
some learning. So that's really powerful. And I'm wondering, what if somebody's in a situation where they feel good enough, they feel strong enough, like they're worthy,
Mhm.
and the other person, in this person's perception, the other person does not value them. So it's almost the opposite. It's not that they're not able to receive, but they're not getting the validation, the acknowledgement
Mm,
that they believe they deserve. What
mhm.
then?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and that certainly can happen too, right? That someone can feel good about themselves, and they're not getting the feedback, they're not getting the treatment that matches. They're getting whether it's they're getting really criticized, or the person they're with is really absent and doesn't seem to be attending to them or attuning to them. What then? One thing that I would say is to see if they can really name what's going on, to really name it and to name it in a way where they're being really open and talking really about themselves. And I think this is one thing that where communication can go awry sometimes is people understandably want to be heard. Who doesn't? What can happen a lot of times is partners are trying to reach each other. They're trying to get each other to hear each other, and so they can kind of do things like use you language, right? Say, you're making me feel this way, right? So if someone who feels good about themselves sits their partner down and says, look, you make me feel bad, right? You keep criticizing me, or you're never there, and I don't like this. Um, Even though they're coming from an understandable place, what could inadvertently happen with that kind of approach is they may, again, not intentionally, of course, they may inadvertently make it less likely that their partner's going to hear them because now the person is feeling attacked. And so a kind of good way to modify it is to, in some ways work less hard because they can, kind of take the pressure off of themselves to have to make the case about their feelings to their partner and provide proof. And in other ways, they're working harder because they're actually shining the light inward and really using I language and saying, I'm wondering if we could find a time to talk. So timing is good, finding the right time when people aren't rushed. One person's heading out the door, they're not overly tired, where they can just sit down and to really name their experience in a descriptive, uh, honest way, right? So it might be I've been noticing that there are times when we're spending time together, I feel so sad and it feels so painful because I feel like I hear words of criticism when that really don't map on to what I'm experiencing. I hear words of criticism rather than words that are more loving. Or I'm really hoping that we can spend time together, and it feels like I can't reach you, that you feel a lot more far away. Um, and I this has been painful for me, and it felt important to me to share this with you. Could we have a conversation about that? And it might even be where if the person can give the benefit of the doubt, where it's honest, right, where they really think that there might be a more benign explanation. In other words, if they don't believe that their partner is cruel or uncaring, because lots of times people can do things like be more absent or distant or critical, and it's another one of those self-protective strategies that works against someone, right? So that so often, not always, but oftentimes can be what happens, or it's a replication of what someone learned, and they don't even know they're doing it. Uh, Someone might say, I know you. I know you love me. I know you think well of me. I know you care about me in this relationship. I know that you're not trying to do this. Could we talk about it? Then the person is less likely to feel attacked, and they're more likely, relatively, it's not a guarantee, but they're more likely to lean in. If they feel attacked, then they're more likely to shut down. And now the person feels even farther away, that they can't be heard. So that is something that I would suggest as a starting point. If that's not effective, uh, I'd advise trying to have the conversation again. Sometimes letting something in it takes more than one effort. If that doesn't work, then actually reaching out and working with a couple therapist can be a great option because oftentimes partners can be locked in dynamics that they don't see, or they don't know how they're getting stuck or how to get out of it. And a couple therapists can really be a great way of kind of looking outside of the dynamic and helping people shift things and see their blind spots.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you brought up that option as well.
Mhm.
and how to communicate in a way that is even more mindful of how what we're sharing is going to be received by the other person and responded to. So, being very mindful of their protective mechanisms and their defensiveness and so on. If should we point the finger, at them. And also when we say, I feel sad, I feel it's also there's a part of it where we're taking kind of ownership a little bit, and it is important to take some ownership. And I think anything that goes on, maybe there's something unconsciously that we did that triggered the other person that we may not be aware of or wasn't intentional. Um, so what about like, I'm curious if we can touch kind of a little bit more on the mindset of this is not available to me, right? So those individuals that may be going in and out of relationships, maybe not being able to commit, that kind of thing, where at some point they may have decided that I'm not worthy of having a relationship, or it's available to other people, but not to me, or I can have a relationship, but not a truly fulfilling one.
Mm.
What do we do about that?
Yes, yeah. Part of this is, as we've talked about, um, it's about seeing. I think of it as like kind of fighting an invisible boxer. It's hard to change something that we don't see and recognize, right? So insight is part of the battle. Of course, it's not everything because it's one thing to see something, it's another thing to really be able to tolerate the discomfort that's going to come with trying to trust, trying to do something different, with actually really carving a new path and actually doing something different. And so, what I think of in that is it's a process. And so if someone imagines, oh my gosh, I've relationships, I'm thinking this isn't for me. I've never had this. Let's say someone's never had this, right? And maybe they don't feel good about themselves, right? I've never felt worthy, or maybe they've never had a safe relationship, or both. Uh, it is a monumental potentially likely overwhelming task to imagine, okay, so what do I need to do? I need to just embrace every positive word someone says. Of course, consciously, and this is, I think, part of the trick is consciously someone's going to say, of course I want to do that, right? Of course, right? So it's not that someone consciously pushes away intimacy, that it's much more unconscious. But in terms of being willing to take chances that they're aware of and letting in these moments of discomfort that they might not quite understand yet, if they can really ask themselves, okay, rather than thinking about the whole journey, rather than thinking about being completely vulnerable and completely trusting, right? Trusting every good thing a partner says, maybe being with a partner who might feel very different and unfamiliar. So, for example, if someone, and this feels like an important piece to add, if somebody knows distance their whole lives, someone who's very available and attuned might feel overwhelming. There might be the sense of, oh, you get over there, right? Wanting to push them away. And so someone may feel like, wait a minute, let myself depend on somebody, believe all these good things, and be close to them. Are you kidding me? This is too much. Instead, see if they can take little experiments, mini experiments. And part of the beauty of an experiment is we're not wedded to the outcome. It's a phrase that I've heard that I just love, right? It's we're not wedded to the outcome. So if, for example, if someone, let's say someone believes that the person they're with would never, accept them, would never embrace them, or would never think well of them, if they got to know them better. Uh, and indeed, there is evidence that when people don't feel good about themselves, they do think that their partner thinks less of them when they open up. They do feel less supported in those interactions. If they can try sharing a little bit, they don't have to share something big. If they can share something that's a little bit vulnerable, that they can tolerate, that their partner doesn't know, and see what happens. And what I would advise too for another kind of mini experiment is if they can check in with that person and say, I'm wondering
Mm.
what this was like for you. And this is another tool called meta communication that I love when couples do and friends do and everybody does, because there's something that's very powerful when, as human beings, when we talk about our talking, when we communicate about our communication, a lot comes to light. A lot of good things happen. And so, and people tend to not do that. They tend to not say, well, okay, I said this to you. What do you think of that? What was this like for you when I express myself in this way? How did that land? And we often don't think that we have the ability to do that, but we do. We can slow it down, and that can give people a way of not only taking a mini risk and sharing something, but if their mind is telling them, oh, this person must think less of me, right? If they're convinced, they can actually test that too.
Wow.
And they can also even test, can I let myself believe this person when they tell me it's fine? Because in all likelihood, it is. I mean, what the research on self-disclosure shows again and again and again is that for the most part, when people are open with each other, that builds connection. That is associated with connection.
Wow. And I
Mm.
imagine then, let's say if the answer is no, I don't believe that I can trust this person, maybe to say, okay, well, what would it take just to get a sense of like, how would I know if I can trust this person? Because then we might get a sense of like, what does success look like for us? And either we can ask for things or realize that's not, really realistic, or that's not,
Mm.
whatever that might be, but it's still empowering to know what is it that we're expecting of the other person. What is it that we're telling ourselves in a story, and is it fair to expect that of another human being who's got their own stuff?
That's
um, Sometimes we can realize that maybe we're asking for something that is not fair,
yeah.
or kind.
That's That's right. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think that's an important point that you raised, Vered, because we can really, it's possible, right? Depending upon our experiences as humans, we can sometimes have expectations that are really informed, again, by our history, that may even reflect a very well-intentioned attempt to try to correct for the past. But it that really isn't what we need. So, for example, if a person, let's say a person was criticized all the time when they were growing up, they might feel like, oh, well, the answer to my problems is my partner's never going to make a negative comment. If they really loved me, they would never do that, right? They'd only share positive things, right? Or if my partner really loved me, they would always want to open up to me, right? Well, that doesn't happen, right? And so it's understandable that someone would develop those expectations because they're longing to have reassurance that the past isn't going to repeat itself. It's just that the expectations aren't aligned with reality. And actually, if anything, they're likely to make it worse. Because if somebody tells their partner, "Will you criticize me? This isn't okay." Or "Why didn't you open up to me? I'm expecting you to do this." Well, now that partner could feel overwhelmed or could feel shut down, like they're never listened to. And that undermines security. So it's really about trying to really understand more clearly, okay, as a human being who's had this experience, what is it that I'm really looking for? What is it that I really need? Is it really that my partner's never going to criticize me? Is it really that they're always going to open up? Or is it knowing that I'm not going to perpetually experience this? Is it knowing that I'm going to have a safe, connected relationship? Ah, well, that changes the dynamic of the conversation.
And it goes back to parenting ourselves, because we can give ourselves what we need and not put this unrealistic expectation of somebody to fill us up with something. that is really an unfair and unkind expectation often. And so it
Mm.
really does start with us. I think, it starts with us in terms of the power of our beliefs, many of which, as you said, have been conditioned early on, and becoming conscious of them and self-parenting or, um, finding ways to give ourselves what we need. And it's also about starting with us in terms of what we communicate, how we communicate, asking for what we need in a kind and respectful way, curious way, being curious about other people, just as
Yeah.
we want them to be curious with us about why they did what they did and so on, because they have their own stuff. And we
Exactly.
can grow together. So it's this mindset that, crisis really ignites evolution, both for us as individuals in our life's path, also in the dynamic of the relationship. So our relationship can evolve and be more resilient and more resilient, more resilient, and stronger, more intimate over the years.
That's right. That's right. And also that, I really appreciate your point about evolution, right? That crisis can ignite evolution, being backed into a corner. Sometimes it can feel like, oh no, right? Well, this isn't supposed to be this way. And even as it's painful in the human experience, sometimes that's the place where change starts. And thankfully, with every day, in the words of to borrow a partial phrase from a mentor of mine, in relationships, there's always another chance. People always get another chance, and this is true in relationships to try something different. It's true with oneself that there's always an opportunity every day to say, okay, how do I, as a human being in the world, no matter what my background, no matter whether I had a painful history or the most secure, wonderful history possible, what kind of person in the world, what kind of relationship partner do I want to be? What kind of relationship do I want to cultivate? What kind of with a partner, with myself, with friends, with colleagues, to really kind of have a goal-oriented mindset that so often we can set goals in hobbies, career, lots of other things. We can do it in relationships too. We can think about how we want to grow within ourselves and with people. So evolution can happen every day, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you, Holly. And how can people learn even more? Because you've given us so many amazing strategies and things to think about for ourselves and for our relationship. How can people contact you or learn more about your clinic, your books, and all the many things that you offer?
Thank you so much, Vered. So people are warmly welcome to visit my website, which is drhollyparker.com. That's DRHOLLYPARKER. And people can also, from there, they can read more about me. And I have contact information there. I also have an email that people can reach me at, which is Dr. Holly at drhollyparker.com. And I teach at Harvard Extension School. So that's another way to reach me as well.
Yeah, and again, I'm so grateful for all that you gave me through that course. I learned so much about myself in relationship with others, about the power of our mindsets and how they impact the dynamics in our life, and help me be an even better partner to myself and to others. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. It's so beautiful. I'm so moved, Farah. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure working with you. And thank you again so much for having me on the show. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you.